Welcome to the DraftKings Daily Shot. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. Taking a look at tonight's 7-game slate here. Pretty small slate, but there's a lot of different options you can kind of go with here. Some decent pitching. You're not relatively paying up, which is nice. So it's pretty nice that we have kind of numerous ways to go on a Thursday slate. Jumping right in here, we're looking at catcher. For me, I like these Nationals bats quite a bit. You look at Eric Johnson, maybe he's been hammered this season in the starts he's made. In the past, he hasn't been very good. And overall, I think even with Petco considered, I think Nationals kind of come in as really a top 3 offense on tonight's slate. With that being said, Wilson Ramos is a guy I'm looking at behind the dish if I'm paying up. Johnson, I mean, has a lot of 355 WOBA to right-handed bats in his career. A lot of home run potential for these Nats bats, even in Petco Park. Ramos, WOBA over 400 against right-handed pitching this season, ISO over 2. So I like him quite a bit if you're paying up. I mean, you can kind of spin down to some other guys as well. I mean, because there are some GPP shots that you can take on guys like Brian McCann or Jonathan Lucroy. I know Lucroy hasn't been great against lefties, but Kastner's been kind of boom or bust this season. Lucroy in the midst of a nice little power streak, which is nice. McCann obviously going to get a friendly matchup against Gibson, but McCann's been struggling a little bit. Definitely just a GPP play just because I think you can just spin up to Ramos if you're going to actually pay up that high. If you're looking lower, I like Matt Wieters against Eduardo Rodriguez. Wieters is a guy who has also been struggling, but you're also taking quite a bit of a little price dip there. I don't mind him. If you're looking lower, I mean, you can kind of go with some punts here as well. The main one I'm looking at is for the Tigers. James McCann has hit lefties in a small sample size there, which is nice because overall, I mean, one, he's not expensive. You can pay down. You're still getting some exposure to some of those Tigers bats there. McCann threw 38 WOBA off lefties this season, 250 ISO, which is nice. Kind of just a viable punt option with really nothing more to say about him. Because overall, I mean, unless something opens up later in the day, you're not really taking a look at a lot of these guys lower. So definitely consider that. Moving on to first base here. And first base, I mean, unlike yesterday where it was kind of a stacked position, it's a little bit different here. I don't mind paying up here for David Ortiz. I think he is kind of that clear-cut top option. You can save some cash with Miguel Cabrera, but I think Ortiz at 5,600, he's not a guy who's going to kill your lineup just because of the pitching on tonight's slate. With guys like Will Myers facing Tanner Roark, you got Encarnacion facing Nola, Davis with the lefty-on-lefty matchup against Rodriguez. It's kind of tough to really use a lot of these guys, so I think paying up is really that option. Because a lot of those guys down low have been really struggling. I mean, I'll talk about Gonzalez and Zimmerman here, who really haven't been great that season, been kind of unreliable, but are in good matchups. So if you are looking to pay down, it's really with those guys. So overall, I think you can kind of spin down to a Ryan Zimmerman and GPPs to a national stack using the same logic as far as Ramos goes. Very playable on that slate. So I don't think you're taking a huge risk. I think you are going to catch him at some lower ownership, which is nice. And looking at Adrian Gonzalez, I mean, he's starting to slip down the lineup a little bit more. 3,300 is a cheap price tag for him. Junior Guerrero is not a guy I'm shying away from. I think you can look at this Dodgers team and take a couple of shots. I mean, some of them come at some pretty nice price tags. So with that being said, I think you can kind of attack the Dodgers as far as working them into a value and, you know, using those low price guys to kind of pay up elsewhere. So if you do want to get a Bryce Harper in there, you can, and you know, that would be kind of a way to do it. But jumping back to Ortiz, I mean, 480 ISO against right-hand pitching, 393 ISO, 480 WOBA against righties this season. He's been the most consistent out of these guys there, especially in that good matchup. So those are the kind of the 3 that I'm focusing on. I can't see using a ton of other guys here. Hosmer against Verlander, 3,700. I mean, only really in GPPs. Obviously, he had a nice night against Kluber. Still, I think you can kind of look elsewhere there. But overall, I mean, Hanley's coming off a homer. He might see some ownership jump just because of last night. But a guy who really hasn't shown a ton of pop and ton of upside, but is at a decent price tag and is in the same matchup as Ortiz. Look at second base here. There's a couple different ways you can go. If you're paying up, I think it's definitely for Kinsler. And it might be just maybe stack dependent as well, or maybe your core dependent. Kinsler, 5,400. I like him quite a bit against Duffy. You look at what Kinsler's done against left-handed pitching this season, 435 WOBA, 232 ISO. So he's an intriguing play. Obviously, Murphy in a similar spot with those Nationals bats. Pedroia in a decent spot. So it might be just solely where you are trying to make your kind of core around what team, or if you're just looking to get a one-off, Kinsler's kind of my choice. They're all in that same price tag. I like him a little bit more. You can also spin down to Chase Utley, who's, depending on who you're looking at up top, is about a good $1,000 cheaper, maybe even more. So I like him quite a bit. He's been hitting, up in the top of the order. He's hit well against right-handed pitching this season, 354 WOBA. Junior Guerra is not a guy I'm really shying away from. I think you can kind of look at him as kind of a reasonable target against tonight, especially when guys are at that price tag. If you're looking to get some GPP exposure, I really do think that Sabathia is going to carry a little bit of ownership, but I think kind of looking at him and going up against the grain would be kind of intriguing. Dozier, intriguing GPP option, 434 WOBA off southpaws. He's always been that kind of way against lefties, big ISO over 231 there. So it's nice. I mean, Sabathia is a guy who an xFIP over 4. I think there is some regression coming from him. I mean, there hasn't really been anything that changed. He's kind of just been working around some guys. So overall, I do think the Twins bats are pretty intriguing. You can kind of look that way as well. Anything lower, it's kind of tough. I mean, Josh Harrison at 3,300. I'm not really shying away from Cologne in that low total. I think that kind of is a game to look at some value guys in. So if you were looking to punt second base or kind of pay down at, Josh Harrison's kind of the guy I'm really looking at there. Third base here, Donaldson against Nola. I mean, these Jays bats are really just GPP options for me. I'm not really attacking Nola in cash games. Machado at 4,800 is obviously a play to make. In Fenway Park, over under 10, these bats are kind of really all in play for me. Even though the Baltimore bats haven't really hit lefties well that season, Eduardo Rodriguez does show some bust potential at times. So you can kind of look that route, spinning down a little bit. Nick Castellanos priced a little bit higher than I would like, but he is a guy who's hit lefties well in the past, showing some power this season. 12 homers, 4,800 is a pretty steep price tag. I think that is going to keep his ownership pretty low. He is solely just a GPP option because I do think you can kind of spin down to a Jung Ho Kang who's been hitting really well. I mean, over a WOBA over 400 this season, 300 ISO, but very solid. Yeah, Cologne's, limited damage this season, but he's still not a guy I'm completely shying away from, especially on this slate. So I think you can look at Kang as a reasonable play in all formats. Same thing with Anthony Rendon. GPP-wise, I really do like this national stack. So you can kind of look at them as decent options. If you're looking to spin down, I mean, obviously a punt play of Hernan Perez, 3,100 against Casimir. If you're looking to do that, not a bad option. Justin Turner's a guy at 3,600 who's shown a couple of home run upside games of late, starting to come around, which is nice. So, hitting in the heart of that order, I think he'd be a guy to spin down to at 3,600. Once again, Junior Guerra is not a guy I'm really shying away from. Shortstop here, if you're paying up, I think it is easily for Xander Bogaerts. You can also make a case for Corey Seager or plug in Manny Machado if you need to save a couple $100 there. But Bogaerts, I mean, continues to get it done. Another 2-hit game last night. He was on base 3 times, RBI and a run. He just continues to hit the ball well and doesn't really leave you hanging. Look at Wilson. I mean, 329 WOBA to right-handed bats. Bogaerts on the other side, 388 WOBA against right-handed pitching. I really like the spin down to Jonathan Villar in GPPs and even cash games if you need to save some money there. Villar, 413 WOBA off lefties this season, 176 ISO. There is some upside for stolen bases, for some power. I like the difference. I mean, 3,800 from 5,500 is a really nice come-down option because you're putting him in a price range of guys like Danny Espinosa, Jose Iglesias. Obviously, Iglesias homered off Chris Sale. I mean, you're not going to see that too often. If you need to spin down lower, it's Drupal Cabrera, 3,400 against Juan Nicasio. I kind of like picking on Juan Nicasio with some of these value bats for the Mets. Nicasio really hasn't been that good against lefties. 400 WOBA to lefties since 2014, 1.52 home runs per 9. Cabrera, I mean, not obviously a household name, but a 310 WOBA off righties, it's respectable this season. In the top half of the order, I think you can kind of look at him at that price tag. And I really don't feel the need that you need to go down any lower than that. So those are all definitely intriguing options. If you're paying up in the outfield tonight, I mean, obviously Mookie Betts and Bradley Jr. would kind of fit into a sock stack. I like Bryce Harper starting to kind of come around a little bit more. Obviously a tougher day at the plate yesterday, but was hitting over 300. Still, I mean, extra base hits and power haven't really been there of late, but I expect him to kind of be tonight against Eric Johnson. And I like that price tag for Harper. And you look at Pecco, I mean, it hasn't been really that bad for lefty power this season. So overall, this is intriguing for me. I really like Harper in this matchup at this price. I think out of that tier, he's kind of that guy I'm paying up for. You can make a case for Mark Trumbo as well, who ISO numbers are off the chart against left-handed. So I think you can kind of look at that and work him into some GPP lineups as well. And same thing with Gregory Polanco and Jacoby Ellsbury, two guys that I'm on. If you're looking to spin down, obviously, I mean, you can make a case for Ryan Braun, Adam Jones as GPP plays tonight. Braun against Casimir. Braun's been struggling a little bit. Not sure if he's just completely unhealthy or what's going on. Those guys are solely just GPPs. I do think you can kind of spin down to look lower. I like Justin Upton still in GPPs, 3,500. He's kind of shown some big upside games of late, hitting over 300 in the last 10, which is encouraging, showing some power upside, some stolen bases as well in that span. So it's nice to see. Trace Thompson's a guy I like at 3,600. Once again, I do like attacking Junior Guerra tonight, I think. Overall, I mean, these bats are kind of sneaky because, one, he's, been serviceable. He hasn't really had too many blowups, so definitely intriguing. Outside of that, I mean, Robbie Grossman, a guy, obviously a small sample size against lefties this season, well over 500. Sabathia is a guy who I mentioned you can pick on in GPPs, but Grossman, I mean, a decent cash game option for me at that price tag. And one guy, I mean, Andrew McCutchen continues to slide down. I mean, hitting below 130 over the last 10 games here. No homers, one extra base hit, just 5 hits in the last 10, nearly 40 at bats there. 3,300. I mean, you'd be kind of taking a chance on him, but at that price tag, I mean, we know what he can do. I'm going to have a couple shares of him. He's not really a cash game guy for me just because he really hasn't been doing anything of late. But overall, I mean, kind of an intriguing option there just because of that price tag. And if you need to kind of go down any cheaper, there isn't really a whole lot that I like. These Yankee bats, I mean, just depending on what they line up for the role, for what they roll out for that lineup, it kind of depends. I mean, you might see an Aaron Hicks there at 2,900. But, a couple hits there for the last couple games there. But overall, it's kind of damaging down low. So I think you can kind of stay in that mid-tier on today's slate, especially with the pitching. I don't think you need to really dig down and punt at any options or any positions there. So I do think you can kind of create a nice balanced lineup. There is a decent options as far as guys over about 3K and also some top price guys. You don't really have a position at third base that you extremely pay up for, like a Donaldson. Kind of Harper and Ortiz are kind of the two expensive guys I'm looking at. Kinsler as well. So that's going to wrap things up for the DraftKings Daily Trot. Be sure to check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all great tools and content.